This is day 13 of making a VR game. Before we get started here, I'm going to announce a giveaway for simple items from Synty Studios. To enter the giveaway, you just have to type a comment down below. And we're going to announce a winner on day 14. Just like we did on day 12, we announced a giveaway for the Simple Dungeons. So today, first up, we're going to announce the winner for Simple Dungeons. And remember to click the link down in the description. Check out Synty Studios assets here on the asset store. Lots of really cool stuff. And they've always had the blocky style looking characters. But this new adventure pack called Polygon, the characters aren't so boxy. Which I think this pack looks really great. Anyways, click the link, check them out. They are provided a lot of codes for this tutorial series to help give away some of these packs to you guys. So I definitely want to give back by heading over to their store and supporting them as well. Now, let's do the giveaway and announce the winner for the Simple Dungeons. Before we do that, let me just show you what we're going to be working on today. It is picking up a weapon, sneaking up on the guy, and attacking him. So if I come over to the drawer, open it up, get the sword out, it's going to know that I have a sword now. He doesn't see me, so I'm going to sneak up on him over here. And it's kind of hard to see. It looks a lot better in VR, but you'll see, there we go, if I get real close. It's showing this attack target. This is a gaze-based attack, so that if I look at this target and I'm close enough, I'm within melee range, it's going to attack him. So you'll see if I look at that target, it goes ahead and does an attack. Now, the animation is really bad right now. We're going to work on that. But we just wanted a placeholder. And the enemy doesn't die yet. He doesn't play a death animation. But we have got this nice effect. And it doesn't, it's not playing when you start the game. When you start the game, he just looks normal. Depending on which weapon you pick up, it'll show a different attack target. All right, let's announce the winner for the Simple Dungeons pack. To enter into the giveaway, you just had to put a comment on the Day 12 video. So here's the Day 12 video, and all these excellent people put comments in. That means that we have 19 contestants. And we've gone through these scripts in the previous videos, but we just put the contestant's name in here, and then the giveaway controller randomizes the order of the array, and then it spawns everybody with a sphere. Now this time we've added these little platforms. Everyone gets a platform for themselves. And each platform has a script on it called Random Disable. Random Disable has a public float minimum, public float max, and it has a coroutine called Disable Self with a delay. And it waits for that delay amount, and then it just destroys the game object. And so when the game object starts, it starts the coroutine Disable Self with a random range between the minimum and the maximum. So what that means is when the game starts, each one of these platforms is going to disable itself at some random time between 5 and 10 seconds. Now going down the platform 2, we've changed the minimum maximum values to 8 to 13, 11 to 16, 4 to 19, 14 to 19, and 17 to 22. Let's hit start and see what happens. The first thing that we're going to do is hit start and then pause the game so that we can get a chance to come in here and look at everybody's name so you can see your color. Remember to look at your name, catch your color, start this thing up. Everyone's going to fall down to the bottom. First one to the bottom wins a copy of Synty Studios Simple Dungeons. Here we go. All right, on the first platform, we've got someone coming down. Someone coming down on the second. Down to the third. This is getting close. We're all the way down to the fourth platform. And here it is. Last but not least, Dima. Cold-loved Olzinski has won the race. That was really fun, you guys. Excellent, excellent race to the bottom. Nice and quick. Congratulations, Dima, for winning. You've got yourself a code for Simple Studios, Simple Dungeons. Make sure to send me a private message so I can get you that code. And remember to put a comment below if you want to enter in the giveaway for the simple items. We're going to announce the winner on day 14. All right, with that, let's jump into this. Here we go. Okay, today I want to be able to attack the intruder, because he can attack me and kill me. Well, it actually just fades the screen out and restarts the game. But I want to be able to attack this guy. When he starts the game, he should run into this room and just face one direction. Now his eyesight is coming from the head eye position. There it is. It's coming from this. So if I were to come out here, he actually can't see me, and that makes sense because I can't even see his eyes. So if I was hiding in the bedroom when he came in, I should be able to sneak up behind him. So let me work on that real quick, because he can kill me, and I need a way to defend myself. I think there's a sword inside. Yeah, we got the sword inside of this dresser. So there's also an axe here, but let me just move the dresser back into the bedroom where it belongs. And I'm going to have to move the player in there, because the robber right now, we'll fix this later, but right now the robber's coming into the house and within like the first second. So now I should be able to get that. But if I stand in the doorway, yeah, he's going to kill me, because he seen me when he walked into the house. I'm going to have to... Looks like his legs need to move a little bit more there for the animation. But let me check this drawer. I'm going to have to wait for a second for him to run by. Okay. And I should be able to open up this drawer and get a sword out, but I can't. Let me see what's going on here. Oh, I think our screen fade object is in the way of the raycast. So I'm going to move that to the ignore raycast layer, because it's the screen fade definitely doesn't need to. And I got shot through the wall. I think the door here does not have a collider on it. So I really have to hide behind this wall when that guy comes in. Make sure he runs by. Okay, we're safe. And it's still getting in the way. And I can see that because if I if I go up to the dresser and I look at it and I turn off the game object, it works. So I need to go to the main camera, and the physics raycaster event mask is set to everything, and I need to set that to ignore raycast. And I might toggle off some of these other ones. Transparent FX, I don't want to hit that. I'm not going to use water. So far it's just going to hit the default and the UI layer. I wanted to hit the UI layer because we got things on the UI layer down here. Alright, so now that the physics raycaster is ignoring that layer, there we go. Now we can interact. And I also have another problem here where I can't... I thought I fixed this already, but I can't pick up the sword. So I gotta fix that. Okay. I thought I already set this up, but the collider here for the drawer should be... not covering up the entire thing, but just the front area there. That way, once the drawer opens up, the player's view goes past and can see the sword. So I guess I'm gonna hit apply on that prefab because it looks like a prefab. And let's see if we got all the problems fixed. Okay. I can definitely interact with it, open it up, and get the sword. Perfect. Now we just got to make the sword attack this guy if we sneak up behind him. So on the sword, we've already added the event trigger and the interactive object script and the pickup object script in the previous videos, but I'm going to add a new script and call it melee weapon. Melee weapon is going to have... I need to give it an anime... we're going to have to set an animation bool or trigger on the animation controller for something like attack. And then every weapon will have an animator on it. So I see right now it doesn't. Let's go ahead and add that animator. And we'll have to make an animation controller. Let's see. We got animation controller folder. So we'll add a new animation controller here. And sword controller. Back to the sword. And on the controller here, let's get the sword controller. And now we should be able to see that right here. We're going to have to add a new state. This I'll call idle. And there's no motion. In fact, I want to call that none for no motion. And that's the default layer. So by default, it's going to do nothing. But then we're also going to need an attack animation. And the attack animation, we need a transition between nothing and attacking. And that's where we'll have to set a parameter. Probably a trigger. Might end up being a bool. We'll do attack. We'll call this one attack. So we'll say to play the attack animation, just have the attack, and then the condition to come back is going to be has exit time, which is when it gets done playing the animation. The next thing we'll have to do is record the animation. And I'm going to try to do that in runtime because I need to pick up the sword. And then I'm going to go to the animation tab and say create. And we'll call this sword attack. Actually, let's call it attack sword. That way all of the attack animations are grouped together. And then we'll add a property for the transform. Maybe the position, definitely the rotation. And then let's just go ahead and select that object in the scene, which it's not. It's now should be a child of the main camera. Hand mounting position. There we go. So from here, it's going to be maybe more than 1 second, probably 2 seconds. So for the first second, let's go ahead and rotate the sword this way. And probably move it out a little bit. And then for up at second number 2, I'm just going to move it a little bit to create a keyframe. But I actually want to move it back to where it came from. So I'm going to go there, copy component, come down here and paste component values. Let's see what it looks like. Absolutely terrible. Alright, let's see if we can fix this. -90 should be 270. 95. Okay, that's the position. We want to keep that the same. So we got 270, 95. What an attack right there. Let's go. First of all, let's try to copy these values, paste them in here, and see if we're lucky enough to Alright, let's go to this keyframe and paste component values again. That looks better. So that's just kind of trying to get these numbers back to some basic numbers than all the negative crazy 0.0 whatever. That's a pretty slow attack. We better speed that up. I'm gonna go to let's go to let's go to 30 and 60, which 60 is gonna be right there. And back into the game view. It's good enough. Good enough. I'm going to stop recording, and if we go out of play mode, that animation still is going to be saved here. We'll move it into the animations folder, and now on the animator, we can set the, or it already brought the attack sword in, so we'll just go ahead and use that. Alright, so we just have to set the attack. This is the melee weapon script that we've added to the sword, so I'm going to say we need a private animator my anim, and we'll probably need a function for swinging the sword. We'll just call it attack. And when you attack, we definitely are going to have to set the trigger for attack, so it plays that animation we made. And this probably needs to be public. I'm not sure who's going to call this function. Let's figure that out. Okay, I've been working on adding a target so I can attack the guy via gaze. I added this target to his back. And it's the same mesh from the 3D radio button tutorial. So I just used this mesh with this texture. I just modified it. And it's using the alpha cutoff shader, the unlit transparent cutout. And we set the alpha cutoff value right here. So you'll see if I go all the way up to 0, it shows the whole mesh. I never want to do that. I want to go from about 0.1 right here all the way down to, or all the way up to 0.95. And so you can see the effect that'll have. And just to show how that's working here in Photoshop, it's just red. Now the transparency that I put in here doesn't work because the shader that we're using on it treats transparency a different way. So we just get a solid red color, so that doesn't matter really, but you can see the icon of the sword. And this is the RGB channels. So on the alpha channel, it looks like this. And this is where the alpha cutoff value comes into play. So you can see the sword is white, completely white, just like the middle of it is. And that means because it's a value of white, 255, it's never going to disappear when we, even when the cutoff gets all the way up to 1. And so all the way at 1, actually, it kind of looks bad because there's these, it's, I don't know. I tried to fix it, but it would probably get a lot better if I turned off the compression on this. And this image, if I'm not mistaken, is 512. So in Unity, I can set the size here to 512 on a max size and no compression. That actually should make it look better. So back to the robber hit target sword. That's better. That's what I was trying to. So that way you could go all the way up to 1 and the red circle actually completely disappears. Even though it should be there should be almost 1 dot because the middle of this gradient is pure white. And that's of course just a gradient tool with the spherical or circular gradient. Okay, so that's on the alpha channel, and of course when I saved the image, I saved it as a TIFF with no compression, and interleaved Mac RLE, saving the layers. Now if I hit play and that object's actually going to turn itself off until you have the sword. But if I were to turn it on, we can see what it looks like. Now before I turned on compression, I had set that script I had set the script to only go up to 0.95 because without the image compression it looked really bad. And now I can set that value right all the way up to 1. And I'm going to show how this works in just a second. But just to take a look at how it looks now with the all the way down to all the way up to 1. So that's what the target looks like. And actually it doesn't show up until you have the sword. Once you pick up the sword, it shows up. So now it's showing where we can attack with the sword. And he goes ahead and does a simple attack. I want to make a new animation, and I gotta fix the outline here, but we got the basic attack going now. It doesn't do anything to the robber himself yet, but that's okay. There's quite a bit of work here involved to get it to this point. So let me go over the changes that I've made. Let's see, where should we start at? Let's start with the sword. When you pick up the sword, I've added a script onto the sword, and it's called melee weapon. The pickup object's been modified too. So melee weapon. Let me take a look at that script. It does one thing. We have, and I think I already did this in the so you probably already seen this, but we got the private animator my anim, and there's a public function attack that just sets the trigger attack. And we've already gone to the animator and set a trigger here, attack, that triggers the attack sword. Now on this one, I went ahead and turned off has exit time, and I turned the speed on this to 0. That way this doesn't play because there's no animation here, and because it doesn't play, it'll never get to the end, so it'll never exit the animation. So I've unchecked has exit time. That way it can transition into the attack. And once the attack's done, this one will have the exit time. Once the attack's done, it will come back into none when it's ready to attack again. So this script, all it does so far, melee weapon, it just tells the animator to set the trigger attack. And that's on the sword itself, which is right here inside of the drawer. Now, pickup object has got an item name now called sword. Before we added hand and position and hand rotation, but now it has item name sword. Another important thing to mention on the animation, we made a simple animation, and I'm going to go over this again because I don't like the animation. It looks bad. I want to make a new one. But the attack sword, I had to click this button to generate the root motion curves and turn off loop time. And then when I went on to the animator, which is on the sword itself right here, I checked apply root motion, and that let the sword move. That let me move the transform around where I wanted to. Otherwise, it was stuck at 0, 0, 0. So the pickup object script has got an item name now. Let's look at that. Pickup object added a public string item name. And then all we do with it is when we do the move to player's hand function, which moves the sword into the player's hand, we now say game control player equip item. We pass in this game object and this item name. And that's going to make a lot more sense when we go look at this new function. So the game controller has a new function, player equip item. It returns void. It requires a game object item and a string item name. The first thing it does is it sets the player equipped item to the game object that you pass. And player equipped item is a new private variable. The player's currently equipped item. So the game controller itself always knows what game object, and exactly we have a reference to the game object itself of what object the player has in his hand. So when the player picks up the sword, or the player picks up the axe over here, or the chainsaw, for example, or whatever items we add, that game object, this game object, gets set as a variable on the game controller. So the game controller knows exactly what game object is in the player's hand at all times, or if this is null, that means the player doesn't have anything in their hand. That's the only variable that's been added. We also got this one up here, a list, but I'm going to cover that in 1 second. So when we call the function player equip item, we have to pass in a game object because we're going to have to set that variable. And then we'll know at all times what exactly game object the player has in his hand. We also need a name. In this case, it's the sword. So I say if item name is equal to sword, we can do something exactly for the sword here. Before we cover this part, let's look at this item name and why it's being used. Again, it's set on the pickup object script. So on the sword or over here on the axe, anything that you can pick up has a pickup object script. It's going to have a name that's a string, because the game object name is going to be, items underscore axe underscore whatever. We actually want a nice name that we can use. In this case, I would put axe, chainsaw, or over here on the sword, of course, we're using item name sword. And the reason why is, if we look at the robber controller, which, again, the robber controller is the script that's on the robber himself. Over here, it's controlling the robber. The robber controller has a new dictionary. This is a C# dictionary where I can... it's like an array, except instead of saving everything, an array you just put, for example, if I want an array of game objects, I could put a bunch of game objects into an array, and then they would get assigned an index of an integer value, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But in an array, the index, which is how you get those values, the index is always an integer 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. In this case, I want an index of a string so I can access items that are in an array, but instead of accessing, for example, item number 7 in the list, I've put these game objects into the array. If I want to get access to this game object, I have to say my array and pass it in a 3. So I'd say my array, and I would say 3. That would give me this game object. So then I could say dot name, and that name, that if I did a debug.log, for example, it would return this value. Now, say I want to access elements in this array based on something else other than this number. In this case, I want to use a string. So I could say, in my array, get the game object that's called ax. And so, like I was saying, debug, if I was going to do a debug.log, this isn't going to work unless we assign some values here, like sword, all right, this is no longer an array because you can see that we've changed this. This is now a dictionary. So now I can say debug.log my dictionary ax.name, and it would say, okay, let's go get the ax. This is the game object, and of course the name is game object C, so debug.log would say game object C. Now you could have dictionary index and value be whatever type of data you want. In this case, I'm using string and a game object, but you could put whatever type of data you want into here. I could put a game object as the key, and I could put a transform as the value. So this is called a key value pair. It's a pair of values. So I've made a dictionary called, which is a key value pair of a string and a game object. And I decided to call it hit targets because it's going to be a list of all of the hit targets, whether it's a hit target for the sword or a hit target for the axe or the chainsaw, or maybe I have separate hit targets for if the player has a gun, for example. So this is a list of all the hit targets. Right now, we only have one, and it's called hit target sword. It's right here. So our hit target sword, and it has a key value pair of the string and the game object. In this case, it's going to be sword and the game object hit target underscore sword. I'm going to delete this example text. So we have a new dictionary of type string game object. Now, when the robber controller starts, he adds himself to the game controller's robber list. Similar to the dictionary, we've added a list to the game controller. And this list is called all robbers. Now it's not a list of game objects. It's a list of robber controllers. It's a list of scripts. This type of script. So every single robber that I add into the game, including this guy, he's going to go into a list of all robbers. And I'm putting his script in there. That way I have access to his robber controller. So the game controller always has access to the controller of the robber controller script for all of the robbers. Now, because this list is public, when the robber controller starts, he adds himself to the robber controller list. So because this is a robber controller script, okay, on start, game controller control all robbers, that's the name of the list. Add this. So add this script to the all robbers list. That's how this list is going to get populated. Now we're going to find the sword target. And for any other hit target that I add, like for example, if I add a gun target, I would have to do a hit targets.add and add it to the list. Right now we just are using the sword. So we're going to say hit targets.add because this is the dictionary. Now, in order to add something to this dictionary, we have to pass in a string and then a game object. So the first one is the sword. We just passed in string sword. So this string, the sword. And we do, for the game object, this one gets pretty tricky. We do transform.find, hips joint, spine joint 1, chest joint, hit target sword. And it's going to be easier if we put this next to Unity, we could see why. Robber controller is on this game object. Right here. So when we do a transform.find, it doesn't go look through all the children. It looks through only its children. And if it's something down here, we have to give it the exact path. So the path to hit target sword, which is right here, I've made it a child of the chest. So here's the chest. It's kind of hard to see because the neck is a child, the shoulder is a child, this shoulder is a child, but child number 4 is hit target sword. I made it a child of the chest because no matter what the chest was doing animation wise, I wanted this hit target to be right at the back. So the path to this hit target, as we can see, is the first child is called hips joint. So then we put a slash to go to the next child, which is spine joint. After that, it's spine joint 1. Chest joint. Chest joint actually has the child hit target sword. So of course transform.find has to traverse from this transform down to this one, and then it can find the hit target sword dot game object because the dictionary needs a game object. So on start, we're going to add this robber to the game controller's list of all robbers, and we're going to add this sword target, this object right here, to the robber controller's dictionary list I should just call it a dictionary. Dictionary of all hit targets. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to disable all the hit targets, because when the game starts, I want that to disappear. And it's not going to appear until the player picks up one of those items. If he picks up the sword, it will turn on the sword's hit target. And if he picks up the axe or the gun, it might turn on some different ones. And the reason why maybe I should just use a basic generic hit target, but I kind of liked having the icon on here for the sword. And the other reason is this item, this hit target, because I have a sword, it's a melee weapon. I have to be really close to use it. Now, if I have a gun, I might be able to attack this guy head on if I get the shot off first before he does. So and that hit target could be on the front of the head up here. So there probably will be different hit targets depending on what weapon the player himself is using. So for each key value pair string game object target, so for each target in the hit target, so for each target that's in here, which there's only one right now, it's the sword hit target, the target's value, which is the game object, this is the value, and this is the key, set active false. And that's looks pretty tricky, but all it's doing is it's going through. We wanted to go look through this list of hit targets and turn off all the game objects. Simple enough. In order to go through each item, well, one way to do it is to do a for each, and we have to say for each key value pair. Because we can't say for each game object because this isn't a game object. We can't say for each string because this isn't a string. It's a key value pair. So for each key value pair, string game object, target, a single target. So for each item which is in this dictionary, get that target's value, which is a game object. And we want to do a game object set active false. In other words, turn off all the game objects in this dictionary. And then there's a new function here called public void, returns void, enable hit target. And this is going to turn on one of the hit targets that's in here. In order to turn on the hit target, we have to pass the hit target type, which in this case is sword, and we have to pass a bool status, which is true or false, enabled or disabled. So this function will turn on or off. It toggles this checkbox right here. It toggles this on or off. And if we wanted to turn off this one, the sword one, we just have to pass in the string sword right here, of course. Because we would say sword true, that would turn it on. Because when we added the sword into the dictionary, we gave it a key of sword. Now let's go back to this pickup object script. We were talking about how we added a string item name. So here we are on the, let's go to the sword. We could see the mesh, the pickup object script. And we had talking about how we added an item name and why we added it. And we gave it a name of sword. That way we can keep some random game object name out here and just name it sword over here in the pickup object. And that way we can call game controller player equip item. We're going to pass in this game object and the item name sword. So we're passing along this as the game object. And we're passing along sword as the item name. So when we go to the game controller and we look at this function, player equip item, it should make a lot more sense now. We have this, the sword games object, and we have the string sword. So it sets the player equipped item game object to whatever game object is the player picked up. And then it says if the item name is sword. Now we're finally getting back to this part. For each robber controller, and we'll just say robber, in all robbers, and what that is, remember we have this list of robber controllers, and whenever they start up in the start function, they add themselves right here, they add themselves to that list. So for each robber controller, every single robber in all robbers, so for each script, for each robber in all robbers, robber.enable hit target sword. So for every single robber out there, no matter if it's this guy or another one, when you pick up an item, pick up object, script, move the player's hand, game controller control, player equip item. Player equip item. Says for all of the robbers out there, tell that script to enable hit target and pass along the string sword and tell the hit target to be true, which is enabled, on, visible. And remember, if we look at the enable hit target script right here, that's this. This one needs a string and a bool status, and it just says hit targets. So we passed along sword and we said true. So it's going to say hit targets, which is the dictionary here. Hit target type, which we passed along the word sword. Set active, so turn the game object true or false. And in this case, we told it true. So when the player equips the item, if it's the sword, every single robber is going to turn on his game object that is a sword hit target. That's a long way of saying when I start the game, it's going to turn off that target. And if I go pick up the sword, that target should be turned on. And not only that target, but any sword hit target on any robber is going to be on. And we're also set up nicely with these scripts to show different targets for different weapons really, really easily. Now let's see what's going to happen here. This game object everything's in the way here. This game object, which is the hit target sword, I need to interact with it, and I just want to interact with it with gaze. Now we've previously added the script interactive object. This is going to be replaced with my new interaction pack because there's a lot more options on it that are a lot better. But for today, I'm not going to add that. We're just going to... I just added the interactive object script, which means it's going to show an outline. And that's okay. We'll fix that later. And I've set the max gaze time, which is how long you have to look at this object before a click is triggered. I've set that to 0.1. So essentially, as soon as you look at this, a click is going to happen, whether you click the button or not. If you click the button, it'll happen. If you don't, it's going to happen after 0.1 seconds anyways. We have the script attack target, and again, we've already looked at that because all it attack target. No, we haven't looked at this one yet. We're going to go through this script, and we've added an event trigger with a box collider. So this is another interactive object, and let's see here. It's calling a function on attack target. We're going to have to go through the attack target script. So here we go. We got attack target. This attack target script has been added to the hit target sword. So this is an attack target, one of the player's attack target. First of all, we have only one variable, a private renderer, my renderer. And then we got we go find the my renderer, or we say get component mesh renderer. That just is going to go find this object right here, which is the menu model, this thing, of course. And the mesh render, then I called grow automatically on start because there's two functions, grow and shrink. Obviously, grow makes it grow, and shrink is making it go smaller. I've already talked about how the image works in Photoshop and what shader I'm using to achieve this effect. So now it's just a matter of applying, getting this value down here on the alpha cutoff to go up and down between that 0.1 and 1, essentially, is where we decided to go. And the script is doing that. It's doing it with iTween. And we're saying iTween value 2, because I just need to move a value between 0 and 1. Or in this case, 0.1, but 0 and 1. So we say iTween value 2, and I want to move it on this game object. We have to make a new hash. So we say iTween.hash. And this is well documented over on iTween's website. If you go over there, you're going to see the value to. It returns a value to a callback method interpolated between the supplied from and to values. Requires an onUpdate callback that accepts the same type as the supplied from and to properties. That sounds pretty confusing. Okay, it actually isn't. It's pretty easy. What it means is you have to pass a game object. In this case, it's just myself. And then you're going to have to patch a hash table of arguments. The hash table is always iTween.hash. And then you got to pass along a property name, which is a string value in quotes. And then after that, it tells you what that type is, whether it's a string, float, ease type, game object, string, whatever, Boolean. So you can see from is all the property names are strings. So from is a string. 0.1. You can see from could be anything from a float or a double or a vector 3 or a vector 2 or a color or a rect. So you can change any of these things values. In this case, I just want to change a float from 0 to 1. And so from is the starting value, and the type that I'm using is a float. Okay, so I'm saying from 0.1f to, for the ending value, the starting value, the ending value. Okay, so it's going to go from a float of 0.1 to a float of 1. The next one I included is a time. Time in seconds for the animation will take to complete. I said half a second. So the time is 0.5 f, half a second. On update. This is a required parameter because you can see here requires an on update callback that accepts the same type as supplied from the from and to. The from and to type that I'm supplied was a float. So it needs an on update, which is a string, which is the name of a function. It's going to launch this every single step of the animation. So every time that little value changes just a tiny bit, essentially every frame of the game, it's going to call this function. We need to pass the function name as a string, the update. So we said on update, the function that we want to call is set alpha cutoff. Set alpha cutoff has to take a float parameter because that's what this means. The on update callback must accept the same type as supplied in the from and to. So because I went from a float value to a float value, on update is going to have to take a float value. That's how iTweens is going to know automatically. It's going to pass it into here. So on update, set alpha cutoff. And I could stop there. We could ignore this part that I've highlighted and stop here. It would work. Because set alpha cutoff has a float value. It's going to automatically take this from or to value and throw it down into this value slot here. So every frame of the game, this is going to get called, and the value is going to be somewhere between 0 and 1. So I'm just going to say my render.material.setFloat. We have to say underscore cutoff to get access to this parameter right here. And just set it to the value, whatever iTween has determined that value is going to be. Now this extra part says on complete. We could see, of course, it makes sense what that's doing, but if we look at the documentation, we could see that on complete, the name of a function to launch at the end of the animation. And again, we have to pass a string. So I say on complete, call a function called shrink. So grow moves from 0 to 1. When it gets to 1, it says call shrink. And shrink says move the value from 1 back down to 0.1 in half a second. The on update function is this one here. And when you get done, call the function called grow. So this is going to run, that's going to run, that's going to run, and it's going to go back and forth, setting the float cutoff value on the alpha cutoff value here. Now we have one other function called player attack. Public, it's public so that my event trigger can have access to it. And it says public player attack. We're going to say game controller.control player attack target. We're just calling a function. All right, that's this function right here. It's a one-line function. Public void player attack target player equipped item. That's a game object. We have set a private game object, so we always have access to the game object that's in the player's hand. So player attack target does one thing. It says whatever game object is in the player's hand, go try to get a component of an animator And we know that the sword, which is in the player's hand right here, used to be in the drawer. Here is in his hand. We know that the sword has an animator because we've just added one in this tutorial, in this day. So it finds the animator and it does a set trigger attack. Here we go. Here's the attack. And it just sets that attack trigger. That's going to play our attack animation. Back into the game view. Something's gone wrong, so let's start over. The enemy's going to start. He's going to run in. There's be no target on his back. We're going to walk over to the drawer and pick up the sword. At that point, every single enemy in the game is going to have its sword attack target turned on. We're going to sneak up on them. And if I look at that interactive object, it should get a highlight, and after 0.1 seconds, it's going to be setting this trigger. Now, like I said, changes that we need to make here are change the outline. That looks kind of funny. It looks kind of good, but if anything, it needs to be red or something. So to do that, I'm going to just bring in my interactive object, or my mobile VR interaction pack, and we're going to do that probably tomorrow on the next day. So we're going to wrap up today. This has been quite a bit of scripting today, but we do have a nice effect for attacking the player. Obviously, at this point, it's not the majority of the work is done. When the player attacks the target, or we're going to have to tell the animator on the robber to die, which means we're going to have to create a new state, because right now his only animation he has is locomotion. But we're just going to have the new set a new trigger here for him for a death animation. And yeah, the majority of the work for attacking the guy is done, even though we actually can't kill him. And he has a big advantage because he can still shoot us. Alright, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.